Hello everyone, welcome to our classic character profile. I'm Gemma.
I'm Michael.
We're talking about Bev Unwin today.
Ooh,
and
Bev
it's
Unwin.
going to, when I say we, I mean me, because Michael has got a sore throat.
I've lost my voice again. And this
Hooray.
is like, 5 weeks since I lost my voice last time? That my body is
suddenly got
conspiring against me.
You were talking fine just a second ago.
I wasn't, I think I'm talking better now than I was earlier.
No.
But this is me. I say, we're going to do the podcast tonight anyway. I want to talk about Bev Unwin. She's ever so slightly linked to this week's Coronation Street, so we're striking while the iron's hot.
All right, you be quiet now, okay?
I can't help it. You got. I'll let you. I'll
Right,
let you do
shush.
most of the talking, but you've
Shush.
got to let me interrupt if I want
Nope.
to.
What is the link to Bev?
Well, Audrey's been up to see her, hasn't she?
That's right.
This week.
She's taken
Didn't get there.
Teddy's corpse up to see Bev.
On a little trip.
So, Bev was born in around 1955. She had a brother called Lenny Baker. She was married to Jimmy Unwin. She had 2 children, Sharon and Shelley, who was born in 1973. She first appeared on the 24th of March 2003. She last appeared on the 15th of July 2015. She was in 376 episodes and she was played by Susie Blake.
Yeah, so she was like an early 2000s character who made a comeback for Deirdre's funeral a few years ago.
Yeah.
So that's why that last year appearance is so recent.
There was a big gap
Yeah.
between her last appearance as a main character. Well,
Yeah.
a major-
Although I think probably the gap now between the last appearance and now is bigger than the gap between her first last
Well, she
appearance and her
hasn't
last
appeared
appearance.
at all.
No, she's not. And she had a chance this week. And
I don't think she wants to be in the show.
I know. I wasn't expecting her to appear on screen when Audrey's gone to visit her. But I did wonder whether Audrey would be going off visiting Bev in the Peak District and we get to see Stephen's caperings as he's trying to do something with his
We
corpse.
didn't get
But
to
alas,
see that.
it was not meant to be. But I thought we'd still do Bev anyway. This is one of these characters that I wasn't sure whether we'd ever profile, but then I never thought the podcast would still be going after 10.5 years, because in my head she's very much a side character, but still an important one, and I think a really well-remembered character, a fondly remembered character by those who remember her. Would you agree with that one?
Definitely. Now, she... I forgot what I was going to say. But she wasn't a major character. If you kept telling me this week, she only ever really had pieces of other people's stories.
I would say so.
It was mostly Shelley.
Yeah, she came in to be an extra character in Shelley's story, really. Shelley Unwin, who was barmaid and manageress at the Rovers for a spell during the early 2000s. Yep. And really, really important character during this massive story of coercive control with Charlie.
So, if you wanted to know who Bev Unwin was and why Audrey was up visiting her in the Peak District, we're about to tell you.
Not always been friends.
No. Now, the actress Susie Blake trained in the Arts Educational School and London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. She appeared on TV for the first time in 1974 in Rooms, and also appeared in Victoria Wood's TV shows. She was the first, she said the first line of dialogue in the first episode of One Foot in the Grave.
I think that is a pretty good claim to fame, to be honest.
That's a show you don't hear very much about anymore, but when it was on TV, it was massive.
I never really enjoyed One Foot in the
loved it.
Grave. Victor Meldrew is a real kind of icon of British comedy from that era, isn't he? But I was never really into the show, but to have her say the first line, apparently...
she fired Victor
she's the
Meldrew.
character. Because One Foot in the Grave was about this character, Victor Meldrew, who is experiencing
old man.
retirement, and it's all because of her.
Yep. And she was in 12 episodes of a show called A Prince Among Men.
Do you know Prince Among Men?
I don't know what it is.
Oh, I put that in for me. So, if you've been listening to the podcast long enough, that I was a big Red Dwarf fan back in the day. And Chris Barry, who played Arnold Rimmer in Red Dwarf, he was also doing British Empire at the same time in the early 90s. And I think it was when that finished, his next show was this one, A Prince Among Men. And it was rubbish. It was about, I think he played a retired footballer turned entrepreneur businessman thing, and he was this real kind of slick, sleazy kind of guy. It just wasn't funny in the slightest.
Maybe I slightly remember this.
He had a really dodgy Scouse accent. And I remember the theme tune very well. Sadly, I can't sing it for you today, ladies and gentlemen, with the voice. And yes, so Susie Blake played his secretary or something, and she was a main character in it. And this was, say, 5, 6, 7 years before she came into the show as Bev Unwin, and I don't remember recognising her from it. Although I think somewhere I've still got all 12 episodes of A Prince Among Men on tape. Because back in the day, We used to record things off the TV. I did. I had a huge collection of British comedies I recorded
used
off
to
the telly.
record TV shows and Spice Girls appearances.
Oh, yeah, I knew you'd mention
on
that.
on VCR, and I used to record songs off the radio.
I think
on
most
my
normal people recorded
tapes.
songs off the radio, but me, I was all about recording the British comedies
That's fine.
on my VCR.
People
don't get it
We
these
need
days.
people like you to help maintain the archives.
Well, exactly. If people hadn't been doing that back in the 70s or whatnot, we wouldn't have as much Coronation Street now. But anyway, yeah, she was in Prince Among Men, Mr. Bean, the animated series, apparently, and also more recently, Mrs. Brown Boys, that
Mrs. Brown's Boy. She did 16 episodes
beloved
of that
comedy.
after Corrie, and coincidentally, she's quit acting.
Yeah,
On TV.
On TV at least, yeah, she's a stage actress.
She obviously
now.
got burned there. The character of Bev was announced not long after her first appearance.
Before her first appearance, even.
Oh, yeah. The character was announced not long before she first appeared. That's right.
Yes.
In March 2003, the Daily Star claimed she'll have locals cowering with her acid tongue, and she'll have plenty of things to get worked up about. Well, that was true, but I don't know about her acid tongue.
Well, no, I think that, having a bit of a research about the character of Bev, because I'd forgotten an awful lot about her up until this weekend, it seemed like in her early days, she did have a bit of an acid tongue, and she was getting, like, Maria in particular riled up at the Rovers. But when I think back on her, I just kind of think of her as a bit of a nice kind of mumsy figure, but also a bit of a drop her jaws for the younger man sort of thing.
A bit of a
Liz McDonald in a
Yeah.
way. Not so tarty.
not as tarty, but definitely as loose.
Yeah, she definitely
Liked the lads.
She liked the lads, and she could attract people,
Why not?
10, 20 years her junior.
Those
So why not?
nights get very dark and long.
They do up north.
Right, shall I read it out and you can interrupt me?
Oh, thank
if
you
want.
for permission.
Would
to
you like
interrupt
to
you.
have a drink of tea, please?
Yeah, okay.
Right, before 2003, the backstory was that she owned a pub with her husband Jimmy, and then he died on Christmas Day in 1997, which ruined the whole year, probably.
Yes, my interjection there is how tragic. Yeah, so she's got a backstory in pubs. She was very kind of well-to-do, wasn't she? She wasn't kind of snobbish in any way, but she always seemed like she was well turned out and quite pristine, wasn't she?
I would say she was sensible, and she had a good head on her shoulders. Wouldn't you? She wasn't boring, but she had a good.
Yeah, and she knew how to dress up and put on the face for the punters, which is just what you want in a pub landlady, I guess.
So in 2003, her daughter Sharon dies. She was rushed to hospital with severe stomach pains. Turns out it was an ulcer, and she collapses on the floor in the bathroom.
Oh my gosh.
And because the ulcer perforated, and she dies of internal bleeding, which when I read that earlier terrified me.
Could happen to anyone.
Oh, don't say that. We first see Bev at the funeral of Sharon, which Shelley goes to because obviously it's her sister, and Peter is there too, trying to support Shelley, and he has to duck out because he had a bit of a schedule snafu because he was having to secretly marry Lucy at the same time.
Yeah, Peter, I can't remember. I don't think he'd married Shelley at this point. I can't remember what order it happened in. I'm sure someone will correct me. But yeah, this is part of Peter's bigamy storyline. So yeah.
I remember this, and she's going, "You support me and come to see my sister's funeral." I remember this.
And we watched that the other year, didn't we?
All right, so Shelley brings Bev back to the Rovers to stay with her, and then immediately Bev starts airing her views about Shelley and Peter's wedding preparations.
Oh, okay.
So
Fine.
there you
So
go.
they're not married yet.
Including warning Peter to treat Shelley right. And she also stirs things up with Maria, who's working as a barmaid in the Rovers, and tells her that she's lazy and useless, and she looks like a constipated spaniel.
I think that's that acid tongue that we've been
yeah.
warned about. Yeah, so she wasn't a big fan of Maria. I don't think she'd have been voting for her in the council election.
Maria quits.
15 years later.
Bev also thinks that landlord Fred fancies her and is worried that he's going to propose. And then she bets she can get the next man who walks into the bar to kiss her, and it turns out to be Roy. Roy starts to worry that Bev fancies him, and Hayley warns her off, and Bev's like, "Oh, it's just a joke."
Yeah,
What is it about Roy that attracts all these ne'er-do-well women trying to...
Well, it's because, he's you could...
Asexual.
Yeah, he's a bit of a laughing stock, isn't he? Like, oh, you bet you couldn't pull Roy. It's really kind of cruel to him
It
in
is
a way.
pathetic as well. It's like, not everyone cares about what's
Yeah.
inside your pants. Just
But
chill out.
this kind of showed that Bev was up for a laugh, but she wasn't
really that
against... No, she wasn't against humiliating the locals.
Exactly. So Bev realises it's time to move on, and she wants to go to a pub in Wales, but Peter and Shelley persuade her to stay with them. Bev persuades Tracy to help her organise Shelley's hen night. And then this is when they have the infamous bet between Tracy and Bev that Tracy bets 1p that she can get Roy into bed.
Massive, huge scene, very controversial, very famous little storyline there where Tracy ends up drugging Roy, taking him to bed, not having her wicked way with him, but making him think that she had. And that's all just because of this bet that Bev had. And I think lots of people might forget that it was Bev that was
Bev is the one who came up with the idea, was it? Or was
I can't remember. But right. I mean, this is all linked to the fact that Bev had said previously, "Oh yeah, I could pull Roy" or something like this. So she's partly to blame, I'm gonna say.
And this was the height of Tracy's villainy. This period of time leading up to her murdering Charlie, which very much involved Bev as well. So Sunita confides in Bev that she's interested in Kieran and Dev and worries that she's stringing them both along. And Bev says, "Don't worry about it. Just carry on as you are." Basically.
Yeah. So Sunita was Shelley's friend, and so Sunita Allahan, Dev's first wife, only wife, I think. Yeah, and then Kieran, Irish charmer, working at the Rovers and all this kind of stuff. So Sunita's love life very much intertwines with Shelley's during this period.
Bev starts to get suspicious that Peter's sneaking about, and she tricks Kieran into revealing that Peter's was having an affair, but it's apparently all over now. And then Shelley catches Bev rooting through Peter's wallet for evidence of this and accuses her of wanting to split them up. But it spurs Shelley into confronting Peter, who admits there was another woman, so Shelley calls the wedding off temporarily. And
it was just kind of like I'm not marrying you. Oh, go on then, I will.
Then they do have the wedding, and Bev's having to grit her teeth through the whole thing.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly who knew. I think Kieran knew that Peter actually was married to Lucy at this point, but Shelley is under the impression that he has just had an affair and it's over and that's it.
Tracy takes Roy home after the wedding and claims her penny win, but Bev's not very happy about this, doesn't find it funny anymore. She tells her nobody likes her and throws her out of the Rovers, which is where Tracy was temporarily staying.
I think that they had to have Bev say, "No, you've taken it too far this time, Tracy," because like you said, she really was at the height of her villainy at this point, and if Bev had come along with it, then we wouldn't have wanted to root for Bev, and a lot of what comes next for Bev is supporting Shelley and wanting to get her through this awful situation she's with Charlie, and this was her way of saying, even I've got my limits.
Bev comforts Shelley when the truth about Peter's bigamy comes out, but she has to rein it in. She was going to have revenge, but no.
Yeah. Shelley wants to go, like, properly full out revenge on Peter, so also does Lucy, and so she has to be talked down a little bit from that, but Lucy still plows right ahead with it.
Now Bev's been left in charge of the Rovers because at this point wasn't it Peter and Shelley?
Yeah,
so she's left in charge after the fallout from all the wedding stuff and the bigamy stuff. Bev seduces Kieran, who she's taken on as a pot man. Then they wake up the next day very embarrassed. It's a bit like a rerun or a pre-run of what happened with Dev and...
Yeah. I mean, what was the age difference, would you reckon, between Kieran and Bev back then? Like, must be a good 15, 20 years at least.
It really doesn't matter.
But the whole thing was she was a cougar. There's
a tarot card reader who tells Bev that she's going to marry a man connected to the Rovers, and she thinks that's Kieran. Now, interestingly enough, the tarot card reader, wasn't lying.
No, and it's quite funny that when Bev first came into it and she was worried that Fred was kind of ogling over her and he was going to propose to her, considering, how it ends up.
So Bev is appalled when Shelley tells her that she wants to give things another go with Peter, and Peter says, I'm going to go with Lucy and Simon to Spain, but Lucy reveals that she was actually stringing him along and she goes without him, so he's left alone. Everything's a bit complicated because it's a bit awkward because Shelley wanted him to take him back and he didn't want her back. Not long after this, Bev ends up kissing Kieran again, even though he's engaged to Sunita. Betty catches them and Kieran decides to tell Sunita that they want to get married quickly. So they go out for a night on the town, does Bev and Deirdre,
yeah.
and Bev comes back with a handsome...
Oh, no, sorry. No, I can't remember. Bev goes out on the town. She meets up with this chap called John, who tells her that he's an airline pilot. And I don't think the viewers get to see who this person is at first. Obviously, that rings massive alarm bells for Deirdre, because back 5, 6, 7 or so years ago, she'd been caught up with the airline pilot John Lindsay, who had tricked Deirdre into using the credit card, fraudulent activity and all that. That's why Deirdre ended up going to prison. So Deirdre's like, you got to watch out, Bev. John should maybe out of prison by this point. I think it might be him. So Bev ends up acting really suspiciously when she goes out on this date with this John, and he finds her just a little bit weird, and it's not John Lindsay, obviously, and he ends up dumping her because she's just acting too suspicious and stuff.
In 2004, Bev has her head turned by Charlie Stubbs. They go on a date, it goes well, they sleep together, but then Charlie dumps her because everyone gossips about them, and she's still randy and wants to keep dating him and tries to persuade him to go on another date with her, but he's not interested.
So Charlie Stubbs at this point, I think when he came into the show, he was a bit of a he's kind of laddish builder, wasn't he? But I don't think that he was truly cruel at this point. I think he just liked a bit of a laugh, and he was I think he was kind of misogynistic and everything, but he wasn't quite as evil as he had become. But yeah, it was Bev who had ended up he'd caught Bev's eye before he ends up seeing Shelley.
Bev overhears Charlie telling Jason that he's got his eye on someone. She thinks it's Deirdre, and she even goes off and tells Ken that Charlie and Deirdre are having an affair, and then those two have an argument. But actually, the person that Charlie fancies is Shelley, her daughter. Kieran lets it slip that Shelley's mum, Bev, and Charlie got together, but swears Charlie to secrecy. It doesn't last for very long, and everybody finds out.
Kieran tells Charlie, his kind of mate, I suppose, that Kieran and Bev got it on together this one time. He's like, don't tell anyone, Charlie, that I had it off with your girlfriend-to-be's mum. But, as we know, these things don't stay secret for long in soap. And basically the cat is put squarely among the pigeons when that whole secret comes out.
Fred gets fed up with Shelley, being a bit too big for her boots in the Rovers, and he sacks her and then gives Bev the manager's job instead. Bev struggles a bit to run the bar, and before long Betty's resigned, but that's not really unusual. Betty was always throwing her toys out the pram and quitting. She also hires and fires Kieran because he refuses her advances.
She was a bit of a sex pest, wasn't she, Bev?
Yeah. Kieran kicks up a fuss, gets his job back. Bev tells Fred, I'm fed up with this, I quit. And she wants to leave Weatherfield altogether, storms off, gets into a cab, and it turns out Shelley's there in the cab as well, also having a hissy fit and wanting to leave Weatherfield. And they basically both decide they're being silly and make up with each other and get back into Weatherfield. And
everything's back to normal
fine.
for now.
Shelley gets reinstated, etc., etc. Bev warns Shelley off of dating Charlie, but Shelley doesn't listen. And then, not too long after that, Bev gets drunk with Charlie, takes him to bed while Shelley's out for the night with Sunita. Then she confesses to Shelley, and Charlie denies it, and Shelley chucks Bev out for lying. So this is why you shouldn't sleep with the same man your mum's dating.
It's just complicated, isn't it? Gross. It just makes things needlessly tricky.
Shelley reveals to Sunita that Bev had it off with Kieran when he was engaged to her, which we know. Bev then leaves for Bradford, telling Shelley that she'll come back to support her when Charlie hurts her, which
what a mess.
Is inevitable, yeah. 6 months later...
Hope you're following all this. Basically, Kieran, Sunita, Shelley, Charlie, I think they've all slept with each other, or at least attempted to at some point in the previous 12 months here.
So 6 months pass, and this is when Charlie's abusing Shelley. she secretly phones her mum, and Bev realises that Charlie's controlling her, and Shelley doesn't want to see her anymore, and she knows it's the influence of evil Charlie. So Bev gets in touch with her good old friend Deirdre, and she allows her to use number 1 as a secret meeting place so that Bev and Shelley can talk. But when they meet up, Shelley won't listen to her when Bev accuses Charlie of being a liar and a cheat, and Shelley tries to put her off of meeting up together again.
So Charlie's abuse of Shelley kind of involved making her think that she was really fat, body shaming her, she basically turning her into an agoraphobic. He was could go off and be a womanizer with anyone who she wanted, and she was left a shell, if you pardon the pun, of her former self. So really quite similar to what we saw recently with Yasmin and Jeff, wasn't it? So it was like the original version of that, and he was really, really cruel.
In 2005, Shelley's become reclusive under Charlie's influence, and Deirdre tells Bev, who comes back to Weatherfield, to slap Charlie, and then she also finds Shelley in her bedroom with a black eye. Shelley refuses to leave Charlie, and she throws Bev out, and then Charlie accuses Shelley of contacting her mum in secret and packs his bag. So he was always kind of using this power he had over her. She's like desperately didn't want him to leave because she was so powerless. She felt like she couldn't live without him.
Yeah, I remember this episode when Bev comes back and Shelley's just, she's up there in the upstairs room in the room with
like
massive black eye, and she's
bags.
like, no, it wasn't him, wasn't him.
Well, Charlie's like, I'm going. She's like begging him not to leave.
Yeah, the power trip he was on. He was repugnant.
So Bev stays in Weatherfield, and she learns more about what Charlie's been up to, including trying it on with Liz, and she gets a job at the Wethy Arms so she can stay and keep an eye on Shelley. But Shelley refuses to accept any help from her, and even bars her from coming into the Rovers because Charlie doesn't want her hanging about and possibly
meddling.
Making Shelley see what he's been up to. But Bev sneaks into Charlie's office because he's a builder. So there's always a dodgy builder. I think that Ed Bailey is probably the nicest builder we've ever had on Coronation Street.
I think you might be right. I mean,
because even like
Jason was quite nice.
Jason was nice, but even someone like, I'm thinking, who's Kevin's dad?
Bill.
Even Bill was a womanizer.
He really, really was.
Yeah. So I think that Ed's probably the nicest
Ed
guy.
hasn't got the memo.
No, he needs to start becoming evil because eventually that would.
Or at least just get a few more notches on his bedpost. Come on.
Well, Bev sneaks into the Charlie's builder's office, gets the contact numbers of his clients, phones them all up and says, he's a cowboy, he's a rip-off merchant. He confronts her about it, and she goads him, and she wants him to hit her, but he doesn't. He just mocks her and tells her, I like keeping Shelley like a caged bird, and kind of like rubs her nose in it, basically. Kieran decides to leave Weatherfield, and Bev tries it on with him again.
She's a horny old lady, isn't she?
Well, he says you're a disgrace, and he leaves. Now, Shelley
She just kind of strikes me as the sort of person who, like, throughout the past 30 years of her life could have whatever man she wanted. It makes me wonder how faithful she was to her husband when he was still alive, because she had no problem at all with just literally throwing herself.
Maybe she thought to herself when her husband died on Christmas Day, she probably thought, all my life, I thought I would spend my whole life with this man, and now he's gone. I'm free. I'm not going to ever get attached to one man again. I want to jump from bed to bed because love hurts, but sex feels so good. What do you think?
I think that's exactly right. She just never seemed to show any interest until the end of any man slightly her age. And you're right, it wasn't romantic. It was literally all about the pure animal lust for Bev.
Yeah, good for her. So Shelley and Charlie get engaged, and Shelley begs Bev to make up with Charlie so that they can have a nice wedding and stuff. And she refuses, and Charlie warns Bev, don't ruin this wedding. Shelley has a hen do, and Bev and Violet tell her about Charlie seeing other women and how he's made a pass at Violet and
another
stuff.
barmaid at the time.
And Shelley's like, I don't believe you. But some doubt was sown in her mind because she has a triumphant jilting, leaves Charlie at the altar, and this is the very famous scene where Bev's in the church going, yes!
If you know, we said at the beginning of this that Bev isn't necessarily remembered, but those who do remember her fondly. And I think for people who love Bev, this is the one scene out of them all, even though, you know, Shelley was the real heroine of this scene. But this, for me at least, when I think what's my favourite Bev moment, it was when Shelley jilted Charlie at the altar and Bev's just like, oh, thank goodness. Because, I mean, this story had been running for a year or year and a half or more, hadn't it? And the triumph, the relief, the joy on Bev's face when Shelley finally realised what an arse Charlie had been was just what we were all feeling as well.
Yeah, like, thank goodness. She's done it.
Bev had been trying to convince her all this time. That's why I love her so much. She was a really great mum. I mean, yeah, she kind of slept with her daughter's boyfriend. She was a great mum who slept with her.
Yeah, okay.
But she loved her daughter, and the frustration of not being able to convince her about this animal that she was going out with and then and engaged to, it was just worth it for this scene. And that whole episode is fantastic, because after that's when Charlie takes Shelley out for a drive, and then she gets out the car and then is just walking through Weatherfield in her wedding dress, doesn't she? Gets to the Rovers and starts scoffing herself with cake after not being able to eat what she wants.
Where a lady sees her striding about with a wedding dress on and she's like, I dumped him or something.
Yeah.
She's like, good for you.
There's a woman at the bus stop and Shelley's like, I dumped him, you know, and she's like, yeah, good for you.
Later on in the year, Bev agrees to accompany Fred Elliott, the jovial butcher
and pub landlord
and publican. She accompanies him to the Weatherfield Traders Association dinner dance. They have a kiss and then they become an item.
So Fred was very much a romantic, wasn't he? Where Bev was all about the bonking. Fred, you know, he had his animalistic side as well, but he certainly liked to wine and dine and woo the ladies, and his thing was he used to just propose to everyone.
Yeah.
And this is why when Bev came into the programme or came into the Rovers and she heard about this, she was worried that she'd be the next on his hit list. But yeah, as it turned out, they were destined to be with each other. She just had to get a few other things out of it. Well, not really. Just had to get a few younger men out of her system first.
In 2006, she goes on a cruise with Liz and Vernon, who were married or dating at that time. Fred was supposed to go with them, but he pulls out at the last second because he's not sure that she feels the same way about him as he does about her. Then a month later, he gets a phone call from her to say she's been dumped on a country lane with no belongings after dating a guy called Greg she met on the cruise, who then dumps her. So they admit their feelings for each other and he proposes at last and she says yes.
And actually, to be honest, I said that scene at Shelley and Charlie's wedding was one of my favourite Bev moments. But this was as well, although I think this was much more for Fred. It's not as famous, but as like a viewer who lived through this and saw Fred proposing time and time again and getting turned down again and again and again, or, you know, when he married Maureen and then she ran off with Bill Webster a week or so later, it was a really, really well done scene where Bev accepted his proposal and they're out in the country and like Fred is just ecstatic about it, and I kind of picture the camera swirling above him. It is a really, really lovely scene.
So Shelley and Ashley, the children, think it's too soon and don't want them to get married and tell them to call off the engagement, but it doesn't work. And Shelley accuses Bev of acting like she's the landlady of the Rovers when she isn't. She's just engaged to the guy who owns it. And Bev says, "Look, I'm marrying Fred for love. I'm not doing it for money or power or anything." And Fred says, "Look, Bev will be the landlady once we get married, so deal with it, Shelley." And Shelley gets her nose put out of joint quite a lot by this and ends up getting offered a manager's job at a big country pub in the Peak District.
Well, Shelley had really fought for this manager's position because, I mean, what we're seeing on Classic Coronation Street, or we've been seeing recently, is her vying with Gina Gregory to get the manageress position, hasn't she? So she'd earned this spot, and now to have your mum come along and be your boss, that's not going to sit well with anyone.
Just especially considering that it's just only because she's dating.
Yeah.
The guy.
Yeah.
So Bev's gutted that Shelley's going to leave for the Peak District and tries to get her to stay by setting her up on a blind date with Steve.
Poor girl. That's not enough to put you off. I don't know what it is.
But
they go out for an evening together, and I think
he does.
Shelley and Steve, they go out to some restaurant, wherever the restaurant of the day was, Philandro's or whatever, and Steve ends up having to get called away for something, and Shelley's there left in the bar, and Charlie's there as well. You know, nemesis, evil, controlling Charlie, who she jilted not 6 months ago, or maybe it was a bit more than 6 months ago. So what happens? They do it at the bar. And he just ends up seducing her again. And he basically throws it back in her face afterwards and says, I told you still fancied me. All I had to do was give you the quick nod, and you were dropping your jaws for me. You had to slag.
You didn't win. I still have power over you.
Exactly.
And she leaves the Peak District the next day.
In shame.
Now, Bev is still in Weatherfield. She's supporting Claire Peacock through her pregnancy, but she gets annoyed when Claire asks Audrey to babysit instead of her. Meanwhile, Audrey's getting jealous of Fred and Bev being happy together.
Because Fred and Audrey had always had a bit of a thing, hadn't they?
Yeah.
Even when Fred first came into the show in 94, I'm going to say, he was a bit leery towards Audrey. He was a much more kind of repugnant character when he first came in, wasn't he?
Well,
he was a proper kind of...
Well, from the very beginning, he was lusting after Audrey because he took them to France.
Yeah, and he was like, oh, you're a very handsome woman, Audrey Roberts.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was just a bit
and
more
that was
creepy
when Alf was
with
there.
it. Yeah, exactly.
And he was still trying to come on to Audrey with the blooming mare, her husband, in the same car. Yeah,
so they'd always had a bit of history, and they'd been friends. They'd been like kind of ships that passed in the night. Obviously, Alf had died in 1999, I think, but they'd never really properly got together. But now Audrey's thinking, you know what, actually, I wish
that was me. I could imagine myself being happy like Fred and Bev are.
Well, Audrey was used to the high life, being married to the mayor of Weatherfield, wasn't she? And she had this, the big house in Grassmere Drive.
Fancy things and nice hats.
And Fred was loaded. He was absolutely minted. And I don't think it was just about that, but I think she could see herself, being very comfortable and settled.
Sounds
and
nice to me.
Almost like a kind of Alf replacement, a kind of portly, well-off kind of guy.
So, Fred tells Bev, I found a cottage near Shelley's pub. We could go and retire there. So, I'll sell the Rovers to Liz and Steve, and we'll go. And Bev's getting annoyed because Liz, before she's even moved in, before they've even sold it, she's starting to try change things and make her mark on the place. And Bev does not like this.
Weeing in the corners and everything, probably.
Probably. Now, Shelley comes back to the street for the wedding between Bev and Fred. And she is up the duff.
With Charlie's baby.
She's pregnant with Charlie's baby, and she's like, well, no, it's I used him, not the other way around. And Bev's like, you should probably have an abortion. And she says, no. I don't remember what happened there. Did she keep the baby? She
keeps the baby. So Shelley Unwin has got Charlie Stubbs' baby up in the Peak District.
Isn't that interesting?
So when was this? 2006.
So when Audrey went
15.
up to go see Bev, you might imagine that perhaps Bev's got her grandchild, son, daughter, don't know. What year was this?
This
was
2006.
So how old would that child be now?
16.
So this is peak age for Kill Bill, Revenge of the Child, coming back to confront Tracy over the fact that she murdered their dad.
Or a little bit like we had with Jade a couple of years ago as well.
That's a little story idea for you, Coronation Street.
That wouldn't be a bad idea,
because Tracy's so reformed now. I don't know if it would work really, but
just imagine Tracy being confronted with the child of the person that she murdered and pretty much got away with a murder of. That's a storyline right there. Story. I love it. And I tell you what, if it means getting Shelley and Bev back, yes please. Because
I don't think we will get them back.
I don't think we will as well. But
wouldn't it be a great idea for her?
Putting that with predictions for next year.
So So yeah, she's like, it was my idea. I seduced him, not the other way round. So Fred then, as they're getting ready to get married, he senses something's up with Audrey, and she says, "Listen, I've realised now that I wish you were marrying me, not her."
Bev.
Yes, and Fred's now in a quandary. And I remember this because didn't the silly mare say something before? And you also wonder how pure
Too much of a flippity gibbet.
How pure are her feelings really? Because would she have thought about him at all if he'd moved? No. Would she have wanted to marry him if she wasn't watching Bev?
I think she might. I kind of get a feeling like you don't realise what you're missing until you've almost lost it.
I know, but that's FOMO, isn't it? It's not real, is it? You can't live your life in the fear of missing out. You got to just do what
he was a randy
make your
git,
decisions,
and he was a bit of a handsy old fool in the early days.
No way to live.
No, I think that he had become much more of a gentleman. That I think, Bev or not, she might have ended up.
Okay, so he's in a quandary, but he's still going to marry Bev, and but he invites Audrey to come to the wedding. But on the day, he gets told that Audrey can't come because she's unwell, but actually she's just sulking, isn't she?
Yeah.
So he heads off with the car before the ceremony to see her. He goes and says, they have this really nice conversation, don't they? Where he's like, regretfully, I am going to marry Bev. Yeah?
It's like, I'm sorry,
could, in another life we could have, but, this is what I'm doing. And Audrey kind of has to make her peace with it, really. He gets up, walks into the corridor and collapses and dies of a stroke.
It's tragic.
And then...
It was such a sweet thing. It's like, oh, be happy, Audrey, be happy.
That's right. And she's like, yeah, all right, maybe I will, I don't know. My son's going to be a murderer, so we'll see what happens there. Anyway... Ashley blames Audrey, and then he also decides to blame Bev as well because of all the pressure about wanting a quick wedding. So
nothing to do with all that red meat or anything.
Poor old dead Fred. Liz is annoyed. Think of all the victims, including Liz, because now Bev doesn't want to leave the Rovers to go to live in this little cottage and retire next to Shelley. And unfortunately for Bev, because she wasn't married to Fred, she's gutted to find out that Fred's left everything in his will to Ashley and she doesn't get anything. She gets drunk and then she bars Audrey from the funeral. She loses her mind after this because...
I think Audrey ends up going anyway, but you're right.
Think about the fact that Bev knows that even... She can only go by what Audrey told her was the last conversation they ever had. But she knows for a fact her husband, her to-be, was in another woman's house who he kind of fancied when he died. Yeah. She's obviously super suspicious of this.
I think that's enough to drive anyone a bit.
She goes a bit mad. She goes to the funeral in her wedding dress. Ashley gives her a watch that Fred was going to give her, which had engraved "To Beverly, my beauty." And then after the funeral, Audrey's just going around telling everybody how much she loved Fred, which is not helpful. Then Bev gets Fred's ashes and refuses to give them to Ashley for some reason. Well, she's just in a mood.
She's like you said, she's just kind of lost it. I mean, come on.
She's in a
Nobody
total
expects their husband to drop dead an hour before the wedding. It's enough. Yeah. So she's hoarded Fred's ashes. But then she eventually
gives him half in a gravy granules jar, which is what he would have wanted, I think.
Oh, yeah.
A nice smell of gravy. For eternity.
Yeah, mix them up with a bit of water, pour them over some prime rib of beef.
Oh, no, don't use gravy granules on prime rib of beef.
It's ashes.
Yeah, that's true. Steve and Liz are supposed to be buying the Rovers and they want to move in, but Bev won't move. She's very reluctant, and Steve calls her a clingy shower curtain and eventually manages to persuade Ashley and Claire to take her in. But she soon gets on their nerves because, she's nothing really to do with them. She's hanging out now with her dead, quite husband's son and his wife.
She was going to be the stepmother to Ashley, but...
They never really got on.
No, I don't think they did particularly.
And they're getting on each other's nerves. And by this point, Tracy and Charlie are dating, and this is where we start with the plan that Tracy had, because Charlie made a mug out of her by sleeping around. She was not having it. So it wasn't because she was, she was being abused by him or because she wanted revenge for womankind about how horrible Charlie was. No, she just got her nose put out of joint and then she decided to take revenge for that reason. Bev and Claire are getting worried that Charlie's back to his old tricks and controlling Tracy, but actually Tracy's making out this is happening to make Charlie seem abusive, to set up her alibi for when she kills him.
Yeah, she's like faking arguments. She,
Yeah.
she irons her own hand or something, doesn't she? So yeah, Bev's a bit suspicious here.
So Bev finally gets a hint that the Peacocks are getting annoyed with her, and she decides to move to go to be with Shelley.
In the Peak District.
She sprinkles Fred's ashes and a little bit of delicious beef-flavoured dust together with Ashley and Claire on the Derby Dales. And then she heads off to the Peaks and goes to live.
And that's the last that we thought that we would see of Bev. And she's one of these characters that's a convenient excuse for other characters to go and visit.
You're losing your voice completely.
It's getting worse, isn't it?
Just stop. So Deirdre, whenever Deirdre's not in the show, it gets explained that she's away at Bev's, including when Peter's having his trial, which I forgot what it's for.
This was the Victoria Court fire that Peter.
Have you got any tea left?
No, it's gone.
Okay, well, she says
a little bit.
I'm stressed about Peter's trial. I'm at Bev's. So she was at Bev's in 2015. So this was a gap from 2006. So 9 years where she wasn't in the show, but she comes back to tell everybody that Deirdre has died. Deirdre was staying with her when she had an aneurysm or something, and she's just died. This was after Deirdre sort of came back and went on holiday with Ken, and then she threw the trifle, and then they went.
Yeah, the throwing the trifle was when she went off.
That's her final scene.
But yeah, it was Ken had been away in Canada visiting Adam. He comes back. They go to Wales. Then we have Peter going on trial. Deirdre's like, I can't cope with this. Goes off to Bev, and that's the last we as viewers see her. And it's on Deirdre's 60th birthday that Bev knocks on the door at number 1. Ken's expecting to see Bev and Deirdre, but alas, Deirdre's dropped dead.
She gives Ken Deirdre's glasses and says Deirdre was ashamed to come back to the street after hearing about Tracy having an affair with Tony Stewart, which honestly, after everything else she's done, I think that wouldn't even register in my mind. But after the funeral, Audrey and Bev make up, and then she heads off to the Peak District for the final time. I don't imagine she'll be back, but she has now instead of being Deirdre's alibi, she's Audrey's alibi for why she's gone somewhere. It
is really nice that they made up. I mean, I'd kind of forgotten by the time that Bev came back that she and Audrey had even had a falling out. But it's one of these things that it was a really, really lovely scene.
Yeah, it was unfinished business. Yeah, and. It's a shame that we never got that with Rita and Bet.
Yeah, Bet and Rita have now really fallen out for nearly 30 years.
It really sticks in my craw that's never, and I don't know what their plans are, if they're going to give Bet an ending or what they want to do.
I don't think Julie Goodyear would do it.
No. Julie Goodyear, I don't imagine Julie Goodyear would ever come back, but if they want to say Bet's died, really... To me, I know this is completely off topic because we're supposed to be talking about Bev, but Rita acts like such a wise old bird, doesn't she? She's always giving people advice and telling them, you should do this and that and blah, blah, blah. She's got the biggest unfinished business hanging over her head of anybody on the street. And for all that she gives out wisdom, she really needs to take a leaf out of her own book. And if they ever do kill off Bet in the show, I really want Rita to regret those years that she...
They were pals. Pals.
Well, they were supposed to be pals, and then she stabbed her in the back. Rita is the dragon of Weatherfield. She's sitting on a hoard of gold coins. I've had this conversation before on the podcast with you about how Rita is just an old package with too much money. I
think that if they kill off Bet, then maybe they should discover a letter that she'd penned to Rita but never sent or something.
We need I really, really want an ending.
We need closure.
I do. Right, so back to Bev. Bev came back to the show 9 years after she originally left because she had become close to Anne Kirkbride, who played Deirdre. And she has this quote that she said about her. Anne made everybody feel part of the family. She was the one who got everyone together, made them laugh, raised the temperature. If you went on location, she'd get out the chairs and she'd be sunbathing, making you laugh, and taking inappropriate photographs of people who were snoring in deck chairs when they should have been learning their lines. She was absolutely key to keeping everybody's energy up on a long day, at a funeral or at a wedding or any occasion when the whole cast were there and we were all a bit down in the doldrums because it was a long day. So when she left Corrie for the first time, she said, for Coronation Street, we had to get up at 6 a.m. and go home at 8:30 p.m. It was a long day and the hardest job I've ever done. You're shooting 15 different episodes at any one time. So in one day you could do 10 scenes in the Rovers taken from 15 different episodes. So it's a continual continuity nightmare. The homework I had to do was quite phenomenal. I used to write down my storylines so I could refer to them if I suddenly was jumping forward 5 episodes. You had to be right there as there were new writers on different episodes and sometimes they missed a trick and you had to be there to put them right if things were out of order.
You hear that quite a bit
That's
from some
interesting.
departing actors, don't you?
Yeah, I know, but I don't think this is how they do it now because of the block filming, and maybe this is why they've done it that way because things were getting chaotic. It sounds like
I still
there's
think
no way they could do that now.
Things still get filmed out of order.
I know,
a
but I
little bit
don't. I've never heard of
from
anybody
how-
filming 15 episodes in one day.
Yeah,
Have you?
maybe she's exaggerating. I don't know.
Well, she's not here to defend herself. Her last IMDb credit is for the short film Nora, but she was also on TV for an episode of Kate and Cody last year, and she is currently on stage in Agatha Christie's The Mirror Cracked at the Festival Theatre in Malvern.
That's pretty good. That if you're a bit of a Bev and a Susie Blake fan, you can go off and see
Yeah,
her
go
on
see her in
theatre.
Malvern.
Yeah, 71. That's pretty impressive.
She likes the working in theatre, but she doesn't want to come back to soap. And she wants to go to retire in Denville Hall, which is a residential home for actors and other theatre professionals. God, can you imagine
She's got it all
what
planned
that?
out.
What isn't there has been a I was going to say there has been a TV show about an old people's home for actors, isn't there? But
Dunno.
it sounds like the perfect place to.
Yeah. It looks like, I mean, she's had a good old life. She has, and she's got it all planned out. And yeah, it's as small a dent as she made on Coronation Street history, she's certainly a character that I think.
She's an interesting
like Bev.
character. Yeah.
She was nice, a bit flirty, and although she never, it seemed from what we just said, and I think that was pretty much everything she did, she never had a story that was just hers. Even
No.
when she was going out with Fred, it was more
Fred
to
didn't,
facilitate
yeah.
Fred's death story and
Well,
John Savidant leaving the show.
well, she was great, and we'll leave you with some.
Great mum and daughter relationship.
Yeah, we'll leave you with a quote from
This isn't
when
it? I just
Eric-
had to get this one as well.
when Eric Gartside was introduced to Bev Unwin.
So this was played by Peter Kay, which, you know, a classic episode.
So this is when he was dating Shelley, isn't
Well,
it?
they had
a
a
blind
date. Yes.
So she brings him back. Or,
No, this is before. This is when he picks her up.
he picks her. He
At the
picks Shelley
Rovers.
up, sees Bev, and says, "I can't believe you're Shelley's mother. You look far too young." And Bev says, "Oh, thank you. You can't be looking close enough." And he says, "Oh, you're right. The neck. I can see the neck now. That's the giveaway." And you can just imagine Peter Kay performing that
Yeah.
perfectly.
Really, really
Really,
good.
really comedic. So there you go. That's Bev. If you wondered why Audrey was visiting her, I mean, imagine. Can you just imagine after all the tension these two women have had, finally making up at Deirdre's wake, and then they fall out again because
they have a
Audrey
flat tire.
drags a corpse up just to hang out in her
Yeah.
driveway overnight.
Well, I really enjoyed that trip down memory lane again. I had forgotten quite a bit about Bev, so I hope it was of use to some listeners, maybe people who enjoyed watching her at the time but had forgotten a bit, or, you know, people who have not been watching for that long and wanted to find out a bit about a character who maybe doesn't get the praise or the you know, the legacy
Yeah.
that many of the Corrie strong matriarchs do.